Hey guys, MrPokke here, back with another video, and on today's episode of Early Access Review, we are going to be taking a look at our very first 5-star limited remembrance DPS, Aglaea, right? So Aglaea is going to be somewhat marking the start of how one of the version 3's biggest DPS archetype going to be, which is going to be utilizing the power of Mimo sprites. We've sort of seen this with Remembrance Trailblazer, but they really act more like a support, whereas Aglaea is going to be a full-on DPS. Now, for Aglaea herself, a lot of people will probably be wondering how exactly she's going to be like, especially since we did manage to see what her kit sort of plays in the story. If you want to compare Aglaea with units like D Herta, since they are both version 3 DPS, you can sort of consider Aglaea as a unit with a very low damage floor, but a much higher damage ceiling as of this current moment. So what I mean by that is, for Aglaea, if you don't really have the necessary 5-star units, such as Sunday, such as Robin, such as Huo, her damage drop-off is going to be a lot more considerable compared to D Herta, which is not as reliant for her 5-star upgrades, namely Jade and Robin. So for example, if you're going to be running like Remembrance MC with like Baby Herta or Saval, D Herta will still be performing relatively okay. Whereas for Aglaea, if you're not going to be running any of the 5-star units, so if you run her with like Ting Yun, if you run her with Remembrance MC, the performance is not going to be as optimal compared to D Herta. But that being said, if you do have the right 5-stars with Aglaea, then her damage potential is going to be a lot higher than Herta as of this current moment, until we get more dedicated support allocated to D Herta, namely an erudition support or another support units that can synergize with Herta more. So we will be going through a classic things like her character kits, Lightcones, Eidolons, team comps, etc. So without further ado, let's get into today's content and jumping straight into the overview, or rather like a summary of how Aglaea works. She basically fights in combat with her Mimo sprite Garment Maker, right? Her ultimate, she has a tremendously high cost of 350, as you have seen from the story itself, and she doesn't really have a lot of abilities that can actually regenerate energy in her base kit, which means that she's going to be very reliant on external sources of energy in order to maintain our ultimate uptime of 350. So similar to Firefly, Aglaea's ultimate gives her a ridiculous amount of speed, and it will also unlock her enhanced abilities, named the basic attack, when she relies on it to deal the highest amount of possible damage. If you want to talk about it from like a multiplier standpoint, she might not seem like she deals that much damage, but I'll talk about it a little bit later. But she has a very high attack frequency. In fact, Aglaea is going to be the fastest DPS we've ever seen in Honkai Star Rail, much faster even compared to the likes of Scylla, right? Even though she's not even a hunt unit, right? So while in this ultimate state, both Aglaea and Garment Maker, they can reach around 250-ish to almost 400 speed for Aglaea and Garment Maker respectively, and she converts the speed on both units into attack. So Aglaea and Garment Maker can basically gain a very good amount of buffs just from stacking on as much speed as possible. On top of that, they also introduced this brand new mechanic called the joint attack, which will count as 2 different units launching an attack simultaneously, dealing damage based on their own stats, which is sort of like a follow-up attack, except it doesn't take place in 2 different instances. It's just basically 2 units attacking at the same time, right? So this allows Aglaea to deal with the brand new war armor mechanic, or any sort of tally count mechanic which is relying on the attack number frequency very easily, because joint attack would be able to count as 2 distinct attacks, right? So that is sort of like the summary of how Aglaea works. And now jumping into a character kit. Like I mentioned, I'm going to make this a little bit more concise in my early access review going forward. So we're going to split this into herself as well as the Mimo sprite Garment Maker. So how do we summon Garment Maker? Is going to be using either Aglaea's skill, ultimate, or technique. And then Garment Maker's action value, it will be advanced by 100% when it summons at first, which means that after you enter into battle with Aglaea's technique, it will always start at 0 action value at the start of battle. Now this will be a little bit important when we talk about the speed later on, but when Garment Maker's turn begins, it will also automatically launch the Mimo sprite skill, dealing damage to 3 targets, which is sort of similar to like your Mimi's basic attack punches, right? Whereas for Garment Maker, she's going to be dealing a lot more damage. And then when Garment Maker attacks, you can see that it will gain this 1 stack of speed boost from its Mimo sprite talent, stacking up to 6 times, which can be indicated by the bottom left hand corner from Aglaea's portrait, right? The number beside the out of 6 during combat. If you do unlock Aglaea's E4, then this is gonna be 7, right? So for Garment Maker, they have an initial speed of 35% of Aglaea speed. This is going to be determined from the stat screen. You can see in the comment we press the character menu or press C. Whatever speed that Aglaea has, Garment Maker will inherit 35% of it, right? And then every single stat of our Mimo Sprite talent, it will increase our speed by a raw value of 55, totaling for 330 additional speed. So in combat, Garment Maker can quite easily reach 350, 360, or even 370 speed. If you guys did manage to get Aglaea's signature Lightcone, or if you give her a tremendous amount of speed subs or any sort of speed buffs, giving her, let's just say, 160 speed, then Garment Maker will be able to reach 386 speed. So a very, very interesting thing to note here, why this speed is so interesting is because to move multiple actions, right, to take multiple actions in a single wave, it is always based on this speed sheet, which is, let's say for wave 1 is 150. You want to take 10,000 divided by 150, which is going to be one action. So 2 actions is going to be 20,000, 3 actions 30,000, and so on and so forth. So to move 5 times within a single cycle, for the very, very first cycle especially, you would basically need 333.4 speed, which is the speed that Garment Maker can easily achieve. That's right. Garment Maker can extremely easily move at least 5 times within a single wave, and that is not even including Sunday or Robin's action value advance, right? So just something quite interesting to take note. And then going back to Aglaea, her basic attack will also inflict a target with the Seam Stitch state. And when Aglaea attacks this target, it will deal an additional damage of 30% of her attack, and Garment Maker will also prioritize attacking the target with this mark. But Garment Maker will not deal this additional damage. It's only going to be for Aglaea, which you can kind of just see this as an additional 30% damage multiplier, right? So that is essentially how Garment Maker is going to be like. And then jumping into Aglaea, her skill will either summon or heal Garment Maker, but keep in mind that using Aglaea's skill will only regenerate 20 energy instead of the usual 30 from pretty much every single one of our other units, right? If and only if Garment Maker is not going to be on the battlefield, Aglaea will then immediately take action after using this skill, so you can basically use a basic attack after skill for a total of 40 energy, which kind of just brings me, there is basically zero incentive in using Aglaea's skill at all as long as Garment Maker is on field, because it essentially only regenerates 20 energy and it will only heal Garment Maker, so you are just better off using a basic attack every single time, right? And this kind of brings us to the most important part of Aglaea's entire kit, which is going to be her ultimate, right? Her 350 cost ultimate is going to be what allows her to deal the highest amount of damage. Note that from the kit itself, you can kind of see that it doesn't really say that there's any multiplier increase or whatever. It's just basically like increases unit speed and, you know, get this action value order. Doesn't really look like it changes anything, but this changes everything specifically because of the enhanced basic attack as well as the speed buff, right? So why this changes everything, and let's just jump in first. How do we gain energy with Aglaea, right? So Aglaea is going to start off at 175 energy because it's the halfway mark, and you're going to gain 30 from the technique, 10 when a Mimo Sprite Garment Maker takes action, then 20 from a basic attack as well as a skill, and then 20 when Garment Maker disappears, right? So as you can see, Aglaea doesn't really have any reliable ways of gaining additional energy enough for her to just generate this ultimate herself, right? Unlike Firefly, which gives her a 60% maximum energy whenever you cast a skill, Aglaea would heavily rely on external sources of energy in order to maintain an ultimate uptime. It is basically impossible for Aglaea to maintain a 100% ultimate without the use of the energy batteries that we have seen so far. Right? So why is this a potential cause of concern, and why is it so important for Aglaea to maintain her ultimate uptime? Right? So this ultimate unlocks the Supreme Stance, in which during this time, Aglaea inherits the speed boost from the Mimo Sprite talent, which is, you can see from the 6 stacks there, right? So if you do activate this at 6 stacks, this will give you a 90% speed buff. On top of this, it will also increase Aglaea and Garment Maker's attack by a whopping 720% of Aglaea's speed, as well as 360% of Garment Maker speed. So assuming that you reach 250 speed with Aglaea and roughly 370 speed on Garment Maker, you can very easily gain at least 3000 attack during this Supreme Stun state, right? So that's the second point. And the third point, the enhanced basic attack for Aglaea is going to be dealing a much higher damage multiplier, which is going to be increasing with the power of joint attack. I'm going to be splitting this joint attack into a separate fraction, but just know that this enhanced basic attack does a lot more damage compared to the normal basic, right? And then during this stage, Garment Maker is also completely immune to all crowd control debuffs, and when Garment Maker disappears, your Supreme Stun stage would be dispelled, right? So you can see from the action order, there's a countdown with a fixed speed of 100, very similar to Firefly's compulsion mode, right? And then when it reaches the countdown, Garment Maker will basically self-destruct, and this ultimate for Aglaea, you can immediately use this to basically take an extra turn, somewhat similar to Repa, and you can also reset the countdown all the way back to the start of the wave again, right? So with a fixed speed of 100. So for our enhanced basic attack, and why this is going to be dealing so much more damage, is going to be because of this feature called the joint attack. Both Aglaea and Garment Maker, they will deal 200% multiplier of their attack, as well as 90% to adjacent targets. The damage dealt by this attack, it will be using their own individual stats from both Aglaea's screen as well as Garment Maker's screen. You can kind of swap that in the battle. And what is joint attack, or rather how this really works, is it basically combines both units attacking at the same time. So if you want to think of it as a follow-up attack, where one unit attacks and then another unit attacks afterwards, joint attack is just combining both into a single animation. So one from Aglaea and one from Garment Maker, which means this can trigger Robin's additional damage as well as the energy regeneration twice. It will also count as 2 different attacks for Fei Xiao's talent, which means that it will also generate 1 entire point of Flying Aureus, which is basically going to be Fei Xiao's ultimate stat, right? And if you want to take a look at the total multipliers, or the primary target alone, it will do a total of 430% multiplier, including the additional damage from the Seam Stitch phase, right? And this might not look that impressive, right? You have seen a 700% multiplier on Fei Xiao's ultimate, you have seen Aircron's multipliers, so 430 honestly might not seem that much. But one very important thing that splits Aglaea from all these previous version 2 DPS is that she is the fastest unit in Honkai Starbucks, which means because she can have so much speed, you can essentially take this enhanced attack multiple turns, and there's no limit to this enhanced base attack until the countdown for your ultimate expires, right? So if you want to take a look at this example I've seen over here, this is gonna be with a Aglaea, Robin, Sunday, as well as Huo team. So as you can see from this row over here, I've done using the premium Aglaea team comp with all of these 5 stars. Aglaea combined within a single cycle went 9 times with the help of Sunday, Robin, and Hui. This means within this 9 enhanced base attack, it is a combined total of a 3,870% multiplier, not including any of Sunday's buffs or Robin's buffs. So from a strictly damage per screenshot, Aglaea might not seem that impressive, but from the total damage dealt within a single wave, I would dare say that with this current setup, Aglaea would be one of, if not the highest damage dealers in the entire game of Honkai Starbucks, right? So extremely strong because she goes a multiple turn. If you guys play League of Legends, it's a little bit similar to Jhin, damage per screenshot, versus Ashe or like Jinx, which is attacking extremely fast, extremely rapid, right? So yeah, anyways, for Aglaea's ultimate, you also kind of rely on the wave reset similar to Firefly's ultimate. So after you enter into Aglaea's ultimate form, hopefully you can just try to finish the wave before the ultimate expires, and then you go on to the second wave so that the Memory of Chaos or any of the endgame, it will extend the ultimate state. If you lose Aglaea's ultimate state, the speed boost stacks, which is going to be the 6th number over there, it will be reset, and Garment Maker will also need to be resummoned again. Then, during this point of time, you can only use your basic attack all the way until the ultimate is available once again. So, if Aglaea were to not to be in this ultimate mode, you will lose the speed buff, you will lose the attack buff, and you will also lose the joint attack, which means that her damage output would fall off considerably, and you will want to do everything in your power to try to keep Aglaea within its ultimate mode, hopefully throughout the entire course of the battle, or even if you have a bit of a downtime, it wouldn't be that bad. But the longer Aglaea stays out of the ultimate state, then the worse her damage is going to be performing, right? So that is going to be that, right? And that would pretty much cover the gist of how Aglaea will function in battle. And if you want to take a look at some of the major tracers, the first one is the attack buff during the ultimate, which is going to be extremely high. You can see 3,000 attack, 4, 5, 6,000 attack Aglaea, not too uncommon. The second one will be able to retain 1 speed boost stack, which means that once Garment Maker is resummoned, 7, it will immediately take action and attack for 2 speed boost stacks, which will put it at roughly 150 speed. But ideally, you don't really want to be out of the ultimate mode anyways, so you will always try to stay in this 6 stacks as much as possible in battle. And then finally, it will regenerate 50% energy at the start of battle, but frankly speaking, this has no impact whatsoever in our endgame content, but it is a huge quality of life in our overall, in our similar universe, because without the ultimate stage, then Aglaea just basically does no damage, right? And then lastly, minor tracers, 22.4% lightning damage, 12% crit rate, and 12.5% defense. Would be good if we don't really have the defense change it to like speed itself, but it is what it is. And finally, for our skill leveling priority, basic attack number 1, followed by your Mimo Sprite talents, followed by your ultimate, followed by our Mimo Sprite skill, followed by our own talent, as well as our own skill. Technically speaking, for Aglaea, every single one of her kit and the talent and the skill leveling tree, they are pretty important, with the basic attack being the highest priority because of the enhanced base attack. The skill, I would say, is going to be the least important because you only really use this for healing and you will almost never ever use it, aside from the very first cast to summon in battle, right? So that is pretty much going to be it for Aglaea's character kit. Now, moving on to Aglaea's Lightcone 7. First of all, signature Lightcone, time woven into gold. Increase your base speed by 12, and after the wearer and Mimo Sprite attacks, gains 1 stack of Brocade, which is going to be a 9% crit damage buff up to 6 times. When you reach the max stacks, increase your basic attack damage by 9%. So this increased speed is going to be your base speed. And all these base speed, it can be converted into attack because of Aglaea's major traits, and it will enable us to reach her speed thresholds with Sunday. That is going to be very important, especially if you want to play this little tech that we're going to be explaining later on. This is going to be pretty much the only Lightcone in Remembrance right now that can give us this speed buff. So if you do not have access to this signature Lightcone, then it is going to be quite unlikely that you will reach the required speed thresholds for the best performance, right? Also, it basically grants us 54% basic attack damage as well as 54% crit damage, which is going to be a very nice damage upgrade by itself. But that being said, if you do not want to get a signature Lightcone, you can also think about the Battle Pass Lightcone, which is going to be my white face shell. Increase crit by 20% and damage dealt by 36%. It is pretty much the best in slot 4-star option with permanent buffs, no trigger condition whatsoever. If you do not get this Battle Pass Lightcone, then Genius Greeting, which is going to be a 4-star Warp Lightcone, would increase your attack by 32%, and after using ultimate, basic attack increase by 40% for both the wearer and Mimo Sprite for 3 turns. At a lower input position, it really doesn't do too good. In fact, it's even worse than a 3-star Lightcone because Aglaea already has a lot of attack, right? But if you do get it as an S5, then it wouldn't be that bad. Then if you really don't have any of these, then the 3-star Lightcone Reminiscence is really not that bad, but the stat decrease from the attack, the HP and defense might be something you want to factor in. It gives you a 48% damage boost. Just note that your Aglaea as well as Garment Maker, they are going to be more squishy, so do keep survival into consideration as well. I would say, generally speaking, since we don't really have any other Remembrance Lightcone alternatives, and this is the first time we have seen a limited 5-star Remembrance Lightcone, the only real good alternative to Aglaea, I would say, is going to be this Battle Pass Lightcone. Aside from that, Reminiscence wouldn't be too far off, as long as you kind of fix up Aglaea's main problem, which is going to be the energy regeneration. Then whether or not you reach the high speed with Aglaea is not going to be the #1 most important factor, right? So between both speed and energy, Aglaea's bigger problem, or like the most important thing to address, would be her energy issues, right? So with that out of the way, I kind of want to touch on this a little bit, which is how much speed does Aglaea need? Tying back to a signature Lightcone, right? So during combat, Aglaea's ultimate as well as the 4-piece Triumphant Song, it will increase her speed by 96%. If you do have her signature Lightcone, I would recommend this very interesting setup, which is the 2+1 setup with Sunday, where Sunday is gonna be at 134 speed and your Aglaea will be quite literally double of Sunday speed, which means you want Aglaea to hit 269 speed in combat. Alright, so this is exactly the same as a 135/134 speed setup, but no one else in Honkai Starbucks has been able to achieve the double speed except for Aglaea. She will be our first ever unit that can be so fast, she can literally lap Sunday by an entire action before Sunday bars up Aglaea again, right? So in order to hit this 269 speed in combat, you would need to have roughly 160 speed before the 96% speed buff, right? So reaching this 269, let's just say 270 speed, it will also mean you are perfectly synced to Robin's ultimate countdown. right? Since you would be able to lap Robin's 90 speed ultimate, because that's going to be the ultimate cost 3 times, which is going to be very, very important because even though Aglaea is not a follow-up attack unit, she attacks very, very frequently, as well as the fact that she has the joint attack mechanic. So you can in fact trigger Robin's energy regeneration a lot, even if she's not going to be a unit like Fei Xiao, Dr. Ratio, or even Topaz, right? So if you include Aglaea with units like Huo, you can pretty much have a 100% Robin ultimate without using a follow-up team comp. Which at this point, again, you kind of ask yourself, do you still want to use Robin for a follow-up team comp, or do you want to use Robin for another team comp such as Aglaea? That's going to be up to you, right? And that being established, how exactly do we reach this 270 speed? If you have the signature Lightcone as well as the speed boots, she would then have 139 speed, which means she would still need roughly 8 to 10 speed substats, assuming they roll between 2 to 2.5 each, right? Which, frankly speaking, is not that easy because you need to hit this out of your 5 pieces of relics, assuming you already included your speed boots. Without her signature Lightcone, it is pretty much gonna be almost impossible because you would then need 15 to 18 speed substats across 5 pieces of relics, which means that you need to roll at the bare minimum 3 speed rolls for all 5 relics at a bare minimum, and you hopefully get them to be high rolls. If you got them to be low rolls, you will need even more speed subs. So if players do not get this Ninja Lightcone, you will need some sort of external speed buffs, such as your E1 Huo or your like a E1 Rame or like your E2 Robin, etc, right? If you do have the required number of speed, then if you want to allocate this into Sunday, it is gonna be fine. Because even if you want to sacrifice your crit ratio for your speed subs, Sunday gives us quite a bit of crit value himself, right? You can basically get away with a stat like 80% crit rate and 100% crit damage, and you will be completely fine because Sunday as well as Aglaea's signature Lightcone, they both provide her with a lot of crit buffs during combat. So for speed tuning perspective, if you can hit a 160 speed, that would be the most ideal. If you cannot hit this 160 speed, and this is going to be very difficult if you don't get a signature Lightcone, you can frankly just even consider running an attack boots on Aglaea, because if you want to take a look at your speed boots or attack boots conversion, right? Because you can convert speed to attack, Aglaea will gain 7 points of attack for every point of speed, which means that a speed boots with 25 speed will increase per attack by roughly 180, but an attack boots on Aglaea will still increase the attack by roughly 400, which is going to be almost triple of her speed boots. And the rationale for running attack instead of a speed boots for Aglaea is because if your Sunday is going to be tuned to be 134 speed, then any speed above 135 for Aglaea is completely useless. It doesn't really gain any inherent benefit whatsoever because you're essentially tying the +1 speed, -1 speed setup between Aglaea and Sunday. So at that point, you're better off just running an attack boost, getting a little bit more speed because she already gets quite a bit of speed in battle, and then just play Aglaea like how you play any of our normal traditional crit DPS, which is DPS followed by Sunday followed by DPS again, right? This is assuming you cannot hit the 160 speed setup. And then if you were to use an attack boost Aglaea, because she still gains so much speed in battle, you can honestly also bring up Sunday speed. So if you don't want to run a 134 speed Sunday, you can try to bring up, for example, if Aglaea's speed is in battle is going to be already at 190 or even 200, then Sunday speed can be a lot faster. You can try to go for 160 speed Sunday, which is going to be 4 actions in 2 waves, or even something more than that, like 174, etc. Right? So this setup is gonna be not too shabby, but one potential problem with running this is that during your ultimate downtime, her unbuffed speed would be at the base 100 speed, because by then she is not able to inherit any of the speed bars guarded by your Mimo Sprite talent, right? So that is gonna be the Aglaea's speed tuning portion. And now jumping into our relic, which is how do we build Aglaea. Honestly, not too difficult as well. For your body, either crit rate or crit damage. For your boots, I just mentioned you can either run speed or attack boots depending if you can hit 160 speed or not. And then for your planar sphere, lightning damage boost, because she already has so much attack that lightning damage boost is gonna be best in choice. And then for your rope, I personally prefer energy regeneration rope more than attack percentage. This is because, like I mentioned, she already gains a ridiculous amount of attack from her ultimate, and it is not like you deal that much less damage without running attack rope. In fact, Aglaea's ultimate uptime is gonna be the most important one, not specifically because of the multipliers from the enhanced base attack, but basically her kit as a whole only functions during her ultimate. Her speed buff, her joint attack, her attack buff, everything is basically only during this ultimate. So getting an energy regeneration would be very, very recommended, especially for players who do not have access to external energy sources, right? Also, if you were to lose your ultimate like I mentioned earlier, you would completely reset Garment Maker's speed all the way back down to 150, which means you need to embark all the way back to 6 stacks all over again. And then if you are only going to be using base attack with Aglaea, you also don't have the attack buff from the speed conversion because you have no ultimate, right? So one could say without her ultimate, Aglaea serves very, very little purpose. So getting an energy regeneration rope just to be a little bit more consistent with ultimate would be the ideal goal, right? The goal of this build is to minimize the downtime of Aglaea's ultimate state. And then jumping to our relic sets for our 4-piece, the brand new 4-piece Hero of Triumphant Song, that's going to be the best in slot. It helps us reach the 160 speed threshold, especially with her signature Lightcone. If you do not have this 4-piece, you can also consider running the old 4-piece Musketeer, which is going to give us a speed buff, attack buff, as well as the basic attack buff, right? The damage dealt by Aglaea's joint attack, they are also considered as basic attack damage for both units. But unfortunately, Mimo sprites cannot receive the basic attack damage buff from this set. Only Aglaea, right? That aside, Aglaea still does a control damage of herself, so Musketeer is also not too shabby. And then if you really don't have any of these, you could consider the 4-piece Lightning, which is like the super old version one set for Jingyuan back in the days. But that's for you guys to decide, right? And then for our planar ornaments, there really isn't a best in slot planar ornaments yet because none of the planar ornaments bonus applies to our Mimo sprites. That being said, a significant portion of the damage are still going to be coming from Aglaea herself, which means that our banana set, the 48% crit damage, is at this point of the game per best in slot 2-piece, right? And the 16% for Garment Maker is a little bit bonus. If you do not have the banana set, the routine arena is also not too bad, with 8% crit rate for both Aglaea and Garment Maker, as well as a 20% base attack for Aglaea herself. The another 2-piece to consider is going to be the Glamour set, because Aglaea will always reach 160 speed with our max speed boost, which means that you can gain the 18% damage buff for herself, as well as the fact that both units can gain the 12% attack. But unfortunately, it does let crit, so if you don't really have enough good crit subsets, then Glamour might not be that good. So that is pretty much it for Aglaea's relic portion, and now going into the Eidolon. So Eidolon 1. The enemy afflicted with Seam Stitch takes 15% increased damage, and this is going to be considered as a vulnerability source, just like Black Swan's ultimate. And after Aglaea or Garment Maker attacks this target, additionally regenerates 20 energy. So the first line is honestly already pretty decent. It is going to be an independent damage multiplier, right? Because it's going to be a vulnerability. But the most important point of this Eidolon 1 is going to be the 20 energy. Because this 20 energy is gonna be able to completely improve our Aglaea's biggest problem, which is gonna be the energy cost of a 350. Like I mentioned, Aglaea has no built-in energy regeneration aside from relying on her teammates or the enemy units, right? So getting this 20 energy every single time Aglaea or Garment Maker attacks is gonna make her rotation feel a lot nicer. Remember how joint attack counts as 2 different attacks, which means that if you were to use joint attack, you actually also gain 40 energy instead of 20 energy. Which means, upon activating this Eidolon 1, your Aglaea would pretty much have a 100% ultimate with no issues whatsoever. If you really want to run Aglaea without Sunday, then an E1 Aglaea is gonna be extremely crucial, because we don't have any other external units aside from Huo that can provide the sufficient energy required for Aglaea, right? So for players that just logged into version 3, you missed out on a Sunday banner and you want to play Aglaea, then this E1 is gonna make her feel a lot better. With Sunday as well, this is also a drastic improvement, because it will also guarantee your ultimate uptime, additional 15% vulnerability and all that kind of stuff. So I would say at this point, between Eidolon 1 as well as the signature Lightcone, Eidolon 1 would be more important for almost every single scenario, because like I mentioned, Aglaea's problem isn't really her speed, because you can just still go for the traditional fast speed DPS, slightly slower speed Sunday, but the energy is the problem. If you do not fix up Aglaea's energy problems, the ultimate downtime will drastically reduce Aglaea's damage output. So at this point, I would recommend E1 over the Signature Lightcone. And also do keep in mind that this is the first time we've gotten a limited 5-star Remembrance, so who knows if future Remembrance units could introduce a potential alternative if you want to run Aglaea with other 5-star or maybe even 4-star Remembrance Lightcones, right? Because this is going to be the first of hopefully the many more Remembrance units to come. As of this current point, the best in-slot option for a Lightcone without the Signature is going to be the Battle Pass Lightcone, and if you don't have it, it's going to be the Warp exclusive Lightcone, right? I do want to point on this one thing: if you're a sweaty meta player, or if you're trying to go for like 0 cycle or even 1 cycle clears, then the Lightcone would technically give you a little bit more value than the ultimate, because with a proper rotation running Aglaea, having the additional speed to go for an additional 1 more action every single time you use her with Sunday, it's going to allow us to deal a lot more damage. And this is assuming that you can mitigate and manage your energy problems, right? So this is specifically tied for the 0 to 1 cyclers, because if you can clear the battle fast enough, then you don't really face that much problem with the energy anyways. Then you just speed run and blitz through the content by going as fast as possible. Then getting the Signature Lightcone might be a consideration. However, if you were to lose your ultimate, then it will completely destroy the double speed Aglaea plus Sunday setup, which is going to be Aglaea moving twice before Sunday, because then your speed will completely go back to baseline and it will ruin the rotation, right? So if you want to play it safe, you don't really want to go for 0 cycles, then bottom line, Eidolon 1 is going to be more valuable than the Signature Lightcone, right? And now moving on to Eidolon 2. Whenever Aglaea or Garment Maker takes action, ignores 14% defense up to 3 times and lasts until any other unit uses an ability. So this effect, it will trigger before the damage is dealt, and the amount of stacks it will flash on Aglaea's portrait. Keep in mind that the stacking condition is for when they take action and not when they launch an attack. So your Aglaea's joint attack, it will count as both units launching an attack, but it will only count as Aglaea taking action. It is not both Aglaea and Garment Maker taking action. So that means her initial enhanced base attack will only ignore 14% defense. Your Aglaea's ultimate can, however, stack this effect, right? Which would allow the subsequent enhanced base attack to ignore at least 28% defense, right? The way that this Eidolon works usually is not that ideal, because number one, for our best in slot team comp right now, we don't really have any additional defense down sources, so you can't really exponentially stack on this defense down. And secondly, because Sunday will usually advance Aglaea before Garment Maker, because every single time Sunday casts her skill, Aglaea will always go up before Garment Maker. So usually Garment Maker can achieve a high stack. This would be otherwise reset, since Aglaea is now taking action before Garment Maker, right? So that is going to be Eidolon 2. And moving on to Eidolon 4, this is honestly not too bad, because increasing your speed buff not only gives you more attack, it also potentially allows you to squeeze out an additional action, right? Now, the second line is going to be quite interesting, which is Aglaea can also stack the speed boost for Garment Maker. Now, ideally, Aglaea wouldn't really need to help Garment Maker stack the talent, since after Eidolon 1, you should be in permanent ultimate stage, which means you are never going to be losing out from this 6 stacks in the first place, right? Ultimately though, 1 more stack is going to be quite nice, which is going to be a 55 speed for Garment Maker and 15% more speed for Aglaea, which also results in higher attack. But since you're not going to be running out from the ultimate after Eidolon 1, the second line is not going to be that useful unless some crazy shit happens like a crowd control or something. And finally, for your Eidolon 6, your classic lightning res by 20%, and your Garment Maker speed is going to be above 220, which should be very, very easily achieved. Your joint attack damage will increase by 60%, right? Garment Maker, once you get this, by the time you reach E6, it's going to be always at around 400 speed, so you will basically always get the maximum value from the Eidolon 6. So very straightforward E6 diabolical damage increase, right? So, and with that, we come to the end of Aglaea's Eidolon, and now finally jumping into our team comps, which is kind of like the title of this video. Does Aglaea really need Sunday? So currently, Aglaea's best in slot team comp, it would revolve running the hyper carry setup, which is Aglaea plus 2 supports and 1 sustain. For this support option, the 2 slots, as of this current time, you want to pick 2 of these 3 supports: Sunday, Robin, and Remembrance Trailblazer. In priority, I would say Sunday is going to be the most important, followed by Robin, followed by RMC. all of these support units, you kind of want to prioritize running either Fleetless or Broken Kill instead of Lusasha, because remember that your Lusasha attack buff, it only benefits Aglaea, right? This does not benefit Garment Maker, and Garment Maker have their own individual stat screen. So going for an area of effect, right, a team-wide buff like Fleetless or Broken Kill is going to be more preferred, right? And as I've mentioned again and again, Aglaea is going to be extremely reliant on our support to generate energy for her, right? She doesn't consume any skill points for herself during the ultimate, and Sunday with Signature Lightcone can also be skill point positive, which means that we will leave the skill point usage for our other 2 slots, namely gonna be your sustain like Huo or your Robin, and both of them, you will let them spam their skills, you can get their ultimate a little bit faster, which then funnels energy for Aglaea herself, right? That aside, does she really need Sunday? So I'm just gonna be completely honest here. No, you don't need Sunday, because Aglaea can still function, I can see from this bureau here, very decently against endgame content. This is a little bit similar to the situation where does Acheron need her signature Lightcone, especially on launch, right? You don't need it because their base kit right now, especially with the content tailor, is gonna be completely fine, but I would say Sunday is gonna be a game-changing support for Aglaea, right? With or without Sunday, Aglaea plays like a completely different unit, and it is gonna be able to drastically increase Aglaea's performance in combat if you were able to pick up Sunday, right? So the main reason for this is mainly because of the energy funnel. For Aglaea herself, she gains 20 energy per turn, 10 energy per Garment Maker, and her ultimate during this point, it only allows her to take roughly 3 actions without any external action value advances, like Sunday or Robin, right? Because Aglaea at this point, she'll have roughly 250 speed, and the countdown has 100 speed. So you basically recover 70 energy after this very first turn of the ultimate, and this means that you will need a lot of energy, namely 280 energy, to re-enter into ultimate again. Which means, unless you have a consistent way of generating this energy from your other 2 supports, you are going to be taking a lot of turns between Aglaea and Garment Maker to go back into the ultimate state. If you have Sunday, he can allow us to take more actions, generate more energy, as well as giving us a very valuable crit rate and crit damage buff to amp her damage up, right? Because for Sunday, remember, he doesn't buff attack, he buffs crit ratio, right? Which is going to be something that Aglaea is lacking, since Aglaea has a lot of attack. At this point of the game, I would say we don't really have a close alternative in terms of an energy battery. Huo does regenerate 20% max energy, but it's not going to be as frequent compared to Sunday, because Huo does take a while to get her ultimate, right? And then if you want to use another battery like Ting Yun, it is also not that bad, but her 60 energy is going to be even less than Huo, because Aglaea's ultimate cost is just simply so high, right? So in summary, Sunday is going to be extremely powerful in pair with Aglaea, but even without Sunday, she is still technically viable for our endgame content, right? And then for our next bench slot support is pretty much going to be with Robin. Robin, time and time again, right, we need to dispel this misconception that she's a follow-up support, because Robin really is not a follow-up support, right? The joint attacks during Aglaea's ultimate, it will trigger the additional damage as well as energy regeneration on Robin's twice, like I mentioned earlier. And considering how frequently Aglaea and Garment Maker can take action, Robin can refresh ultimate very frequently and triggering a lot of this additional damage, right? You can even consider running a physical damage sphere on Robin, something that I've been introduced before, considering how much attack Aglaea already has during her ultimate, right? So this also basically allow our Robin to deal more additional physical damage for her own scaling to improve, which basically puts her at the second best in slot support for Aglaea, right? And then one more support slot is going to be our brand new latest Remembrance Trailblazer. If you do not have the 2 best supports, which is going to be Sunday and Robin, then RMC is a very decent alternative for the 2 of them, because it can provide us the true damage bonus for both Aglaea and Garment Maker, as well as an extra turn for Aglaea. Just need to be a little bit more mindful of Mimi's charges and when it takes action, or better yet, hold on to RMC's ultimate so you don't waste the action value advance. And then our final slot is going to be sustained. At this point of time, I would say that the best in slot sustained by a huge margin is going to be Huo, because she's the only sustain in the entire game that gives us this percentage energy regeneration, right? This not only benefits Aglaea, it also benefits units like Sunday, it benefits units like Robin, and this entire team just functions and synergizes so perfectly with one another. You can also equip Shared Feelings to spam using Huohuo's skill and regenerate 4 energy for the entire team, because Aglaea, like I mentioned, doesn't really use a lot of skill points, and Huohuo can be the one spamming the skill to increase our sustain as well as increasing the energy output, right? So for example, teams, I would say best in slot is Aglaea, Sunday, Robin, and Huohuo. Then if you do not have these, Aglaea, Sunday, RMC, and Gallagher is not too shabby. And lastly, if you don't have Sunday, you can consider running Aglaea, Robin, RMC, and Huohuo, right? Luckily for us, Robin is going to be on a rerun, so players can consider picking up if you want to pair up with Aglaea. And with that, we've come to the end of Aglaea's early access review. Let me know what you guys think of her, and are you guys going to be pulling for her on her release in roughly 1 week away from time of this recording, right? So, word of the day is going to be Deikai. Join Twitch, join YouTube, join Discord, join Twitter, join Twitter. All the best of guys. I'll see you guys next time. Take care.